date, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
This story of the sword of Yamamoto, for me, is a fascinating one. It was about 10 years ago when I was reading the story of Yamamoto that I began to question some parts of the story, especially the aftermath of the crash. The official report states, in recovering Yamamoto's remains, his body was found still strapped in his seat, thrown from the plane, but still clutching on his samurai sword, and described as being in a great state of dignity. An autopsy found 2 rounds in the Admiral, one in his jaw and the other in his shoulder. Medical personnel determined that he was dead before the plane crashed.
I believe it was the time that he was shot down up until the time the Japanese patrol came. It was just a span of about maybe 18 hours. So on the 19th of April, when the patrol came, they found his body and the pilot's body, and they cremated the body on site, which is a tradition. And then they took remainder of the ashes back to Kokopo, or to Rabaul, and then took it back to Tokyo for a state funeral.
What happened to the sword of Yamamoto? So I went digging the internet and I couldn't find one picture of the sword of Yamamoto. My curiosity heightened. I did more digging, but cannot find a picture of the sword in books or even on the internet. It was 24 hours before a Japanese patrol arrived at the crash site. Can it be possible that the locals have got there first before the Japanese? Can it be possible that the locals may have got the samurai sword first? And is it possible the sword may still be on the island? I visited the National Archives, checking if our Kiaps in any of the patrols in the south of Bougainville may have come across or heard about the sword and wrote it down in their reports. I didn't find anything. I then paid a visit to our National Museum, hoping to find some answers. I was met with the War and Transport Curator, Ms. Mukta Magaiva, who took me into the new exhibition recently opened, the Kokoda Gallery. The Kokoda Gallery boasts the history of World War II, especially here in PNG.
In the Kokoda Gallery, we have, as you walk in from the entrance into the gallery on the left, we have the history of the outbreak of World War II. As you walk further in, we have the timeline. And we also have the Gallery of Gallantry space, specifically for the native heroes. And we also have the legacy space.
So this looks interesting. You want to tell us what this is? This looks like a sword, but I don't know what this is.
This is actually the Japanese naval officer's sword, and it was produced in mass production during the Second World War for the officers to use.
Is this the sword of Yamamoto?
No, I believe it is not Yamamoto's sword.
So this could be just an officer's sword, yeah?
The sword for the officers.
Okay. And this one, what is this thing?
It is actually the Betty's door, the door that was taken off from the plane that was flown by Yamamoto during the World War II.
So where is the rest of the wreck right now?
The rest of the wreck is in the Buin, in Bougainville.
So if I want to see the wreck, I have to
travel to.
I have to travel to Bougainville. Ah, okay. So that's what I actually did. Made some phone calls and hopped on the next flight available to Buka. I met Wilson and Alex, our fixers on the ground. I was also thrilled to have one of our landowners of where the crash site is, Mr. Deesing, who's also the head teacher of the Yamamoto Primary School, location 2. The primary school is located an hour's walk from the crash site. I also met up with Father Stephen Posero. A married Catholic priest in the Piano Parish in South Bougainville.
Thank you, Alexis. I think Buin is dominantly Catholic. Religion is more dominant here along Buin. Above that, apart from being Buin, piano. Piano is a dominant Catholic denomination where I'm stuck. And online along here, you can look at general character all, only humble, only generous. At the same time, one was something where they can be a sleeping lion too. If anything that triggers anything, they become dangerous.
I then took a ferry across the Buka Passage to mainland Buka. I had to overnight in Arawa town because of the rain causing floods that can hamper river crossing. I continued my journey the next day to South Bougainville, going past Pangono mine. The remnants of the Bougainville crisis can be seen littering the mine pit. The Jaba River meets with the Kawerong River as I look towards Nagovis, reminding me that I still have a fair distance to cover before I get to my final destination. The Jaba River has a peculiar look to it due to the pollution from the Pangono mine. Arriving in Buin, I went to the crash site. I was met by Joachim Nane, one of the landowners of where the plane crash is. I eventually made my intentions known after a few moments of conversing that I'm looking for the sword of Yamamoto. Time you grow up, it's like sword of Yamamoto. You've been looking too or not?
I've been looking. I'm looking. You've gone down. So the sword was Yamamoto too.
I knew there would be some pushback from the landowners.
Okay, you know something. But I won't give you a story. Branded man, you know the French.
After negotiations, I proceeded to visit the site but was met with some resistance.
Long never site, mirrors are looking something. Now, good for something by information, how by me walk, how by you walk. You do like a map in something. You do me like in something. Good for something, come up wrong and good for. Which I can't money me, brother. You know, check up something. I school to go, never Chabani walking. Tan Chabani come up on a something, outside walking man. On a Chabani become. I'm looking at something, I don't know something. Now you do, this is why you're walking over something. I'm all right.
So you charge me black about 200. For example, you charge me black, me black talking story, me black no cut. But suppose people are going to talk a story, you imagine him, how much man Mary become there? Now you charge him all 200. So people give you free publicity. A lot cost no people. People come buy balloons, people come buy fuel local, buy more happy sleep, buy more water something. People come with free publicity. Story will be free. People give you free you. You don't know charging you or something. Suppose normally by people Papa grounded by me people come now working people. So suppose you one day you meet him halfway. Maybe talking story with you. Maybe I want to na odi some 1 to 2 travel by boy so maybe to With him you halfway. Suppose you one below this lah. I'm alright. After we found a middle ground, I began my journey to the crash site. We drove for almost a kilometer and then continued on foot. So we are walking to the site where the Yamamoto crash site is. According to the villagers, the walk is around an hour, but that's an hour to them. For us, it will probably take us 1 hour, 30 minutes, or even 2 hours. So we have been walking for the last 30 minutes now. On April 14th, 1943, American code breakers successfully deciphered Japanese naval codes, revealing the travel plans of Admiral Isoruku Yamamoto. His itinerary included a flight from Rabaul to Bougainville and then to the Solomon Islands, with an expected arrival at Balalay Air Base at 0745 hours on April 18th, 1943.
They made the biggest mistake in Rabaul, that's where they call it the second Tokyo, by sending a Morse code message about his itinerary. And he was to be escorted by, I think, six bombers.
Wrote a chapter that history may regard as the turning point of this war. Wrote a chapter that
Given the significance of intercepting such a high-ranking officer, the Americans formulated Operation Vengeance. This mission was led by Major John W. Mitchell and involved 18 P-38 fighter planes from the 12th, 339th, and 70th Fighter Squadrons, operating from Henderson Airfield on Guadalcanal. To make the journey, the planes were fitted with 2 external fuel tanks to extend their range. With 2 aircraft as spares, 4 were designated as kill flights and were led by Captain Tom Lanphier. On the morning of April 18th, 1943, the P-38 set off and after 2 hours of flight, reached their interception point on the western edge of Bougainville. To evade detection by the Japanese forces, they flew at wave-top level, taking a longer route. The target was a formation of 2 G4M Betty bombers from the 750th Kogutai, escorted by 6 Zero fighters from the 204th Kogutai, which was just 15 minutes away from landing. Admiral Yamamoto was aboard the lead Betty bomber, accompanied by a fleet medical officer, a staff member, and his aide. In the second bomber was Admiral Matome Ugaki, Yamamoto's chief of staff, along with other officers. As the Americans approached the Bougainville coast, they spotted Yamamoto's flight, which was at 6,500 feet, with the Zero escorts positioned above and behind the bombers. The Japanese formation was en route to Balalay for the scheduled landing at 0745 hours. The Americans, particularly pilots Baba and Lanphier, focused their fire on the lead bomber. Their rounds struck the aircraft, which was seen trailing smoke as it spiraled down into the jungle, marking a critical moment in Operation Vengeance.
I shot into his right engine, through the fuselage, into his left engine. The right engine was smoking badly at that time. I started back into the fuselage again, and as I centered my fire on the fuselage, he seemed to stop in midair as far as I was concerned.
"94 years old Olija Tume was 12 years old when she witnessed the dogfight.
Parupiani talking and the fighting Pinitina and the money. Now I'm to our tenny. But touch. Now I'm talking and I find no good to I can't look in the Yaroma and the Japanese. I'm can't look in the and I'm take Dorong avian bulan. Bulan baik yang tahu penyat kaya. Baru. King. Bulan baik no tu. Tan tu bulan baik no tu ena. Bulan itu ena baru tu en pun down. Ena dona todo wala tu TV tu en tablong inta jong todo wala tu. Now ori to ora tengan. Ena pun down Lucia from the Parana, and Navarra. Now, Ronnie won how you document.
Chief of Staff Ugaki later recalled, I just said to myself, my God, I could think of nothing else. I grabbed the shoulder of the Air Staff Officer Moroi, pointed to the first aircraft and said, look at the Commander-in-Chief's plane. This became my parting with him forever. All this happened in about 20 seconds. The next glance revealed that the plane was no more to be seen, only a pall of smoke rising from the jungle. Oh, everything was over now. Because the pilots of the kill flight did not expect to see the two G4Ms, they had no idea which plane the Yamamoto might be on. As a result, Ugaki had little time to reflect as his aircraft was the next target. Feeling his plane taking hits from the P-38's powerful punch, the pilot lost control of the plane, crashing into the sea at full speed. Feeling the water rush into the fuselage, and with everything turning black, Ugaki eventually awoke to find himself floating on the sea. While he survived along with 3 others on his plane, Yamamoto's Betty was not as fortunate, as the entire crew and all passengers perished. Medical personnel determined he was dead before the plane crashed. Given the gravity of the loss, Yamamoto's death was not revealed until a month later on May 21st. A state funeral was held in Tokyo on June 5th, with part of his ashes placed at the Tama Cemetery in Tokyo and at his ancestral home in Noguoka. Suddenly, the forest opened up to the ill-fated twin-engine Mitsubishi G4M2 bomber, or else commonly known by the Americans as the Betty bomber. Lying in this opening the last 82 years. It was surreal knowing that this was the last place of the person who ordered the attack of the Pearl Harbor and brought the United States of America into World War II. According to the Japanese official report, Yamamoto had been thrown clear of the plane wreck, his white-gloved hand grasping the hilt of his katana, still upright in his seat under a tree. A post-mortem disclosed that Yamamoto had received 2 .50 caliber bullet wounds, one to the back of his left shoulder and another to the left side of his lower jaw that exited above his right eye.
The only survivor of those 6 aircraft, aircraft pilots, the bombers that were there, he was invited to go to America after the war and confirmed that he was there when Yamamoto was killed, was shot down. So whether his head was still intact, but I believe his head would have been smashed, but his stature, his uniform and his command aircraft basically said, well, this is the Admiral's aircraft, so obviously the body, lifeless body here belongs to General Yamamoto.
Another theory suggests that while everyone on board perished, Yamamoto and his personal doctor could have been still alive when the plane crashed. His doctor must have dragged Yamamoto out of the plane and both died much later. The theory suggests that when rescue party arrived 24 hours after the crash, the rest of the crew in the perished plane have started bloating. However, when Yamamoto and his doctor, when found, showed signs that they must have died much later on. Now this is where it gets very interesting. The locals have their own version of the story. 46-year-old Joanita is the daughter of Paul Nunu and is from Kokopo in Buin. Her small village is Kunogu. Paul Nunu is the son of Joseph Nane. Joseph Nane was the first person at the crash site before the Japanese patrol arrived.
Mi bubublong Joseph Nane. Joseph Nane mi biman we time World War II. Emi bin kamabos and so they belong our people.
Joseph Nane could easily be a coast watcher at the time, guarding and watching out for Japanese patrols. By late 1942, the Japanese were already moving the front lines to South Bougainville from the Solomon Islands.
Pupuplomigo, Timorigo, or bin poret. Talk all by Cam Kiddy Mipla. So, or give him more Papa Plomi and bin give him more talk. He got to Chambra way, he go or send or bin talk pedestrian or tassel, one thing hand tassel. Bubuplomi talking more, roti or send.
According to Joanita, Yamamoto was dragged by her grandfather from the burning plane to a nearby creek.
Time or bin say bin mania, Bubuplomi and bin carrying this. I'm a big man. Yamamoto. Emigo bingo putimendo one bra wara sa recording pagari. Time you go give me wara.
Dissing and Leo also confirms that.
So if you say Yamamoto, and you know die in the plane crash, and still come here, come die here.
Come out now. Come out now. Die inside.
You tahu tak lapun limi, you save lusat seret.
Mulai itu nuna buki mulia. Saya nerva generation awal. Musa tu lista time u kama. Now misalnya story ulu hari mau tentu sana.
Seret.
Electoral people at that time ya that stuff.
So where is the sword of Yamamoto?
Maybe the situation here was called crisis, and that is rightfully called. There was no war.
Misalnya pemiori yang belum Japan, people will fight the Second World War. Now we go isi desa, people belum Japan.
Tonight, blood on the Bougainville. Four Corners goes behind the lines of a tropical war in which Australia has got its hands dirty.
Major Uriah Budiara, now retired, was a platoon commander with the rank of second lieutenant during the Bougainville crisis. He described the conflict in Bougainville as a crisis and not a war. The crisis was caused by a combination of factors, including land disputes, environmental damage, and a desire for self-determination. The crisis led to a civil war in Papua New Guinea's Bougainville province that lasted for 9 years. The conflict led to the closure of Panguna copper mine in 1989. The conflict resulted in the formation of armed factions, including the Bougainville Revolutionary Army and the Bougainville Resistance Forces. The conflict displaced a large portion of the population and resulted in the deaths of up to 20,000 people.
Bougainville was not a war. It was an uprising that escalated from a law and order to a full-blown conflict, which involves the use of guns and bombs and to kill each other.
Jerry Singerok is a former Papua New Guinea military officer best known for his role as the commander of the Papua New Guinea Defense Force, or the PNGDF, during the 1997 Sand Line affair. It is common knowledge, mostly in South Bougainville during the crisis, about a sword or bayonet or a long knife that belongs to a high-ranking Japanese officer going back to World War II.
Layu hari musim sampai lebih baik sih sword bersiapan tu, sword Yamamoto bayonet.
Oh, origisi, sabara orang origisi.
Sa time niya, imbing karinis la. Naglakas awan niya. Ay, mi plano kulok taso. Mi belum belaya. Isa manya, belum pala. Belum pala kemas ya. Mi napos.
Platoon Commander Budiara and his men were on patrol and were ambushed by BRA Commander Paul Bobby and his men.
This issue about the sword of Yamamoto, it is not something that we or the defense force was in Kamloo making. My troops and I, we were on a patrol to another village. Check out that village because we've heard from the people themselves that were in the camp center that there was something that was not right in those villages. On our patrol there, we went into a big ambush. We did not know who was actually involved in that ambush until later.
Budiara and his men regrouped and went after Paul Bobby, this time with two objectives. One, payback, and two, because they heard Paul Bobby was holding onto the sword of Yamamoto.
We learned from the resistance that Paul Bobby, this is not official, was in possession of war relic from World War II, and that sword belonged to Yamamoto. Yamamoto is from Japan, and there was a lot of, not only within ourselves, but there was a lot of talk about that sword.
Because of staunch spiritual beliefs coupled with strong cargo cult activities, it is believed the person who's holding the sword of Yamamoto has supernatural powers.
They just talked about it. There's no proof that I'm true, Mr. There's no proof to it. However, we went after that Bobby for two purposes. One, and they ambushed him in play. He was like fighting against us. So we were looking for him and trying to, get him with his troops. At the same time, because word has gone out that he's in possession of that Yamamoto sword, we were also going for that sword.
Budiara and his men were unsuccessful in retrieving the sword.
Paul Bobby kare mumbla banato sword Yamamoto tu nokat.
If the sword with Paul Bobby is not the sword of Yamamoto, then who else can have the sword? I began to hit brick walls. With 1 day left from our 4 days journey to Buin, things were beginning not to go my way. So I had to have a meeting with my team to try another strategy. The sword of Yamamoto can still be out there. I'm here already and I'm not going to give up. I went back to my notes and saw that Joanita did have some answers to some of my questions. Joanita's father is Paul Nunu. Paul Nunu is Joseph Nane's son, the person that took the sword from Yamamoto.
Okay, na papa bli go haitim lo we.
Papa bro mi empim kisin don time bro Bougainville crisis. Time bing ko stabante mor PRAs. Na emping endo din dom pick para promi. Pick para promi empim mor sen kama bro sen PRA commander.
Joanita did see the sword.
Just I look at high promi because papa himself using. Papa promi himself Simatwante ndi seram ba tok mi pro ndi seram mi orsem nem sabe hama maswante orsem mi pro pikini ni program by mi pro kimi em sabe levante mi pro.
In the local dialect, kakata means white. White can mean anything from shiny, from brass, silver, copper, gold, and anything that is white.
Em you ruki morse and by your sign. Sabos rosan and you walk when you are putting the sun and by saying I blow you. Sometimes I was saying you mira.
You describe him handle long. Let me look at someone. Let me look at somebody.
And all bring him was me to go send me grass. Was me got down say call blong and me house. And top long and got all one name blong and was what so one name and got all meters one name blong. pisem sabe haiti.
You sabe haitim lo where?
Emi sabe haiti do saitong austa so se me got hall. All bongol sapaniet. Papa bin kirim mor sapan. Papa pro mi the time bin kirim mor sapan. So course was an house mi ba background. Bidis mi ba stablo en symmetry brom sapan. Ap now kuno bidis en stablo en symmetry brom or sapan.
Okay, so time lo crisis now, Papa Blue eating him this la, so them go kiss him.
I'm being kissing. Minos I was a mass like die now and been like losing this me alo hand bomb barata me. I say by me you're another plan man.
Paul Nunu gave the sword to Francis Sipping, a BRA commander during the crisis before his untimely death by the hands of the PNGDF.
Orbing kirim papa promi or sem disera man and bim sorry yet being suspected more sem no good man ko training more PRA or sem or aw o emi sabe giri more helps papa promi and we slok tatu time more sabe suti more man emi sabe kiwari more or sorry or sabe come out more mat dunia or bullet dongem emi sabe putting medicine dongon na emi sabe come out mi babing go garden. We go garden, same time we go walking garden, it's in Kau. Same time we round him all. So yes, I've been rounding me plan. We go inside the ambushment. And me time Papa blow me and me look go. Me back here up long, me looking more soldier rounding me black finish. Me look go, no God. Me I come in Papa blow me tasser for Nunu. Or is looking me or same. Mobi mi nari kirim papa pro mi putin dong boros dong bullet na making too long na papa pes papa no die I mean knee down tasol I mean not been die yet making too long na papa pro mi I mean been put down na mi orim et from papa pro.
I then got information that Francis Sipping's wife, Martina Sipping, is still alive. I wanted to interview her, but wasn't sure if she wants to talk to me. The trauma from the crisis is still strong. I'm not sure how she will receive me with the intent of talking about her husband, who was killed in a very gruesome manner during the crisis. When she came to meet me and the crew, she was scared and hesitant. We talked a bit, and she agreed to meet us the next day. To my surprise, she made it next day for the interview. She did see the sword her husband was carrying, but didn't touch it. She described it as white and shiny. She was here at the Piano Care Center with her 4 boys while her husband was out fighting in the crisis. When asked about her husband and how he died, she said she didn't know. He was in the jungle.
Kalau kosen lo panen tayo ukro patrol na ukro panen na ukro kini memdo ola mi all distance na ukro patrol na memdo memdo kem na ukro kini memdo.
Now you look him na you harim or you looking no high William Sakarim just la long brasot de Yamamoto.
Abia negalo umong mahasung kong kulbango.
No kata kasi sa sambratan bay karim do place to mi sabe looking.
Abia yo kulbaro kulbaro.
No kata kasi atin ko so tumem na wikisen.
Na suppose we can describe him as la sopa Yamamoto.
Algo como está bien, atemelo. Banda coca cola.
Como sigo.
Yo cola.
Para ver qué tal. Para.
Stop inside the
Bomba boko.
Stop inside the one blongin. Pocket blongin.
The color do this la pocket no one, you sabe no.
Pumakaram tong kasi.
Ako ba nyo ito kakatawa ko?
Muestra.
Ewa ko opo yung tungkal.
Na wanem blonge black la. Wanem blok kaba wanem blonge me. Kaba blonge me.
Maurice was Francis Sipping's right-hand man during the crisis and witnessed the killing of Sipping. He did see the sword and did touch the sword.
By Mr. Na, by Warim. All manner of walking spire. Mibra attacking Mibra long camp from Mibra from Biare. Mibra attacking Mibra. One manner of walking spire. Man from Mibra to ya. Or you walk inspired, looking came from Mibra. Or the night to come. The night to come. Or one thing or Ami or Lema. Or come now or you cover in Mibra long. Area from Mibra or Pussy around him. Or get them Ombra massive long, Ombra two, Ombra was if our pipe player. You want to command us to belong down.
Commander Musa.
Planted spin.
Name Musa?
Planted spin. Tribal mania. People are sort mania. Gumbler man, tribal man. Was in it. Pansaman. Ogatari. By loving Morokan now, we should be able to know. Me want to commander to go to sleep. Was an hour. Over the canal now. Miss an hour, monkey don't know way now. Manari. Sleep yet. Miss an hour is shooting the me along it.
Also, dealing.
Yeah.
So, my
I should the Mimi Pundanos. Manar is enough now, all the person, Tromoy Lutzalongia.
Or Tromo?
Luncha. I'm unconscious now.
The injured Francis Sipping was brought to Piano Care Center by the PNG DF, stood him upright next to the church bell, and was shot.
Okatarongya or line blown or crackerai, you will no carai, you will no carai. Okatarongya or line blown, longya to stop or people blowing.
This was the place where Francis Sipping was buried. Maurice escaped to the Solomon Islands to receive treatment for his wounds.
Osen Bobby Commandaya Blum Nakaroya
Bobby Usa.
Bobby and Commander Blombialea Paul Bobby Manarkis me brushing down long Coromera, Silawai, me protect you no Talo Island Kissing Milon, Sip Kiso, Naoniara.
When asked about the sword,
Paske tu mi orimem, paina tu mi orimem. Mana ukabot.
One baina ti holi.
Emial osen.
Baina lusa.
Lunch Sipping Yamamoto.
So you hold him Luhani?
Yeah. Me now I think.
You you describe him this la sword or baina kamlomi. You describe him. Kalablongan one. So if you can describe him. Emi luko someone.
Lomblaya osen. Panna megasingas. Ninja naivea. Osen. If I putting osen, I'm got lokaya inside. Long on top. If I putting inside, buy you lokang osen. I'm got lock. I'm kababrong I'm got oil. If I come side in ocean too, oily, why no come out? Local Pinisia is by go inside the house.
with all my investigations so far and eyewitness account, the sword or the supposedly sword of Yamamoto is the Kuyo-gunto. It is a traditional Japanese military sword that was used from 1875 to 1934. It has a wraparound handguard and a chrome-plated scabbard. The naval variants had typically slimmer backplates. Gunto means military sword, a reference to the mass-produced swords, different than a handcrafted artisan sword of Japan's past. Kuyo Gunto means old military sword as opposed to Shin Gunto, the new military sword. These swords were around the Russo-Japanese period. This style of the sword has European influence. However, in 1934, there was a nationalistic call to come back to the original sword of Japan, the Shin Ginto. The eyewitness account points to the naval Kuyo Gunto, which will make sense as Yamamoto was flying to Balalei Airport and was expecting a guard of honor. It must be noted that Chu Sugaya katana, made by Amada Sadayoshi in 1934 and given to Yamamoto by his brother Kihachi Takano, is handmade and not factory-made. Amada Sadayoshi created two swords. The Chu Sugaha because the hamon had quiet waves, thus it befits a Navy officer, Yamamoto. And Kageuchi, also known as the Shadow Sword. The Chusugoa, or the sword of Yamamoto, will look similar to the Amada Sadayoshi, or the katana in Shirasaya. Amada, or Amata Sadayoshi, passed away in 1937 at the age of 38. Bougainville is very beautiful from a tourism point of view. War relics are scattered around the island, left behind by the Japanese, American, Australian, and New Zealand during World War II. One can visit the Kangu Hill Powerhouse Bunker in South Bougainville. It is a large concrete bunker built by the Japanese to power wireless stations in Buin. If you wish to visit Little Tokyo, an underground Japanese base in the deep jungles of Patupatuai, you will have to walk past these bunkers before you get there. Tanks, ships, battlegrounds, bunkers, and aircraft can be found in most areas around Bougainville.
Long Chait Bong Yamamoto, Misabe like Mosem, or tourists in our camp because by Mipa behind time, Mipa Bougainville, or what kind of people already need him, because Mipa need him help. Mipa need long the people something straight or some tourists in our camp from Bougainville, na by come helping Mipa too. Mipa no nabron passing more tourists. Long our Mipa walk on like preparing and more sem Mipa nabron. Mipa unity taso, Mipa nabrolan in Misera.
Tourism on Bougainville Island in Papua New Guinea includes visiting beaches, volcanoes, historic sites, and festivals. According to the locals, the sword of Yamamoto was passed from Joseph Nane to Paul Nunu, from Paul Nunu to Francis Sipping, from Francis Sipping to Paul Parapa.
Big problem ended in this era. And now PNG depends also being in this era pinat, making too long.
My quest in looking for the sword of Yamamoto opened up a whole new story from a Bougainvillean point of view. I also learned that two swords, not one, and other items were taken away from the crash site that day back in 1943.
Bubu blomi and being got two pinat. So two pinat now and bubu blomi and mori mistap, and then two papaya, and then papa blomi.
The story of the sword of Yamamoto was the blade that brought the United States to war 84 years ago. But the same story of the sword of Yamamoto brings these four nations together: Japan, the United States, Australia, and Papua New Guinea, with a common theme of peace and prosperity. Today, the wreck of the plane of Yamamoto still stays where it crashed 81 years ago, reminding us of the gruesomeness of war.